The case of Domina. Many teenagers select their idols from among those who are famous and popular. On one hand, it is not so harmful if they focus on positive personality traits, such as determination or a charismatic character. But what happens if, from a young age, a person admires maniacs and glorifies bloody crimes? What if this teenager aspires to become one of them? Domina was born in 2002 in Switzerland and, after some time, moved to Bavaria, Germany. According to the country's legislation, there are very strict laws regarding confidentiality, including those that apply to criminals. Therefore, the girl's exact name is unknown to the media, and she is referred to as Domina M. The girl's childhood was spent under fairly normal conditions. She had caring and loving parents who maintained mutual understanding with her. She performed well in school, was a diligent student, and had many friends. Domina loved animals and even had her own little pet rabbit. At that time, nothing unusual in her life suggested that a thirst for blood might develop in her. In adolescence, Domina, like most young people, became a rebel. She began skipping school and developed interests that her parents did not share. Many of her friends and acquaintances noted that she had become hostile and aggressive, leading to conflicts in her social circle, increasingly provoked by Domina herself. Sometimes she acted arrogantly, yet in candid conversations, she complained that she felt unnecessary and lonely. Unable to find a way out of her circumstances, she became more withdrawn and increasingly cruel toward others. During this period, she began exhibiting sadistic tendencies. Domina stopped following the school dress code and instead wore ripped jeans and applied very aggressive makeup, presenting herself like a typical heavy metal fan. Some conservative acquaintances suspected the girl of worshiping Satan because of her appearance. When other classmates asked her about it, she replied that she could dress that way because she earned a lot of money selling her body. Of course, this was untrue. She simply enjoyed attracting attention and did so in a very radical manner, shocking everyone. For this purpose, she was willing to act rudely and even initiate physical attacks on others. It appeared to be a normal, difficult teenage period, which manifests differently for each individual. However, the situation became significantly more complicated and spiraled out of control when she turned 16. During this time, Domina began experimenting with illegal substances. She first used light illegal drugs and later progressed to heavier ones. Eventually, she developed a serious addiction to this vicious cycle, which drew the attention of authorities. The schoolgirl was detained and charged with using illegal substances. While in custody, she behaved extremely aggressively, insulting officers, attacking law enforcement personnel, and attempting to harm them physically. Following this event, the situation deteriorated further. Domina began harming herself and did not hide it from her family and friends. Her hands were covered with cuts, which deeply distressed her parents. One day, when they entered her room, they saw a rope hanging from the ceiling. This was the last straw, and the girl was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, where she was examined and detained for long-term treatment. Doctors determined that she had borderline personality disorder and also suffered hallucinations caused by the use of psychoactive substances. They also documented several milder emotional disorders. Specialists began treating Domina immediately, but her stay in the hospital proved more difficult than expected. At one point, it was discovered that she had attempted to persuade another patient to take her own life. Fortunately, no tragic incidents occurred, but the episode caused significant concern among the doctors. As a result, Domina's treatment was extended because psychiatrists feared her condition was worsening and believed it would be unsafe to release her. Domina spent months in a specialized institution due to her dangerous tendencies. Unfortunately, no form of treatment appeared to be effective for her. Instead, she developed a disturbing fixation on serial killers. She devoted all her free time to studying them, particularly Ted Bundy and Richard Ramirez. She focused especially on Ramirez, covering her bedroom walls with his portraits, using his image as her phone wallpaper, and selecting a photograph of Ted Bundy as her computer wallpaper. On her social media accounts, Domina frequently posted about serial killers, expressing an intense fascination with them. She shared her opinions about the lives of her idols. She believed that Jack the Ripper was actually a woman. This idea became a major obsession for her, and she longed to kill like her idol. She even drew a pentagram on her palm, which is a serious offense in Germany, punishable by up to 3 years in prison, though she was never caught doing so. Her increasingly alarming behavior worried her family and friends. Over time, her obsession intensified, leading her to wonder what it would be like to become a world-famous serial killer. It was clear that she craved attention, but this desire developed into a pathological obsession. At the age of 17, Domina had a boyfriend named Leon, but due to strict privacy laws in Germany, his personal details and age remain undisclosed. Like her, Leon struggled with mental health issues and had a criminal record, as well as problems related to substance abuse. Domina fell deeply in love with this young man, viewing him as an ideal partner for herself. He was her first boyfriend. The two teenagers spent all their free time together. Initially, their relationship progressed well for both of them, and they appeared to be a harmonious couple. When Leon learned about Domina's fascination with serial killers, he did not give it much thought. He also accepted another troubling aspect of her personality. During this time, Domina often experienced outbursts of rage and struggled to control her aggression. During this period, Domina became literally obsessed with sex. Domina was determined to make her sexual relationship with Leon more intense, asking him to participate in violent acts such as beating and choking her. As time passed, their relationship grew increasingly violent, and she desired more extreme experiences. She even began recording their sexual encounters. Their relationship lasted about a year and a half, but Leon eventually became uncomfortable with her extreme desires and chose to end it. This was a devastating blow for her, as she truly believed they would be together forever. After breaking up with Leon, in an attempt to gain attention, she began spreading rumors about him among her friends and acquaintances, accusing him of abuse and even of raping her. She claimed that he had shared private photos of her on social media. This behavior drew more of the attention she craved. However, in the end, no one believed her accusations. People thought she was merely seeking attention. No one believed her, which intensified her anger. Domina then decided to kill Leon. However, her desire for revenge evolved into a plan to murder many people. She developed a deep hatred for men and decided to lure them into a trap to kill them, especially targeting those who resembled Leon. By April 2021, her anger had escalated. Just 1 month after the breakup, she went to a hardware store with her friend Francisco and purchased a large 30-centimeter knife. At the time, she was too young to buy it herself without raising suspicion, so she required the assistance of an older friend. With his help, she managed to obtain the knife, which she planned to use as her primary weapon against men. After Domina acquired the murder weapon, she spent days conducting online research. She searched for information on how quickly various injuries could result in death, including stab wounds to the neck, lungs, heart, and other areas of the body. She also researched her favorite serial killers, studying the circumstances surrounding each victim's death. Domina wanted to learn not only the most effective ways to kill, but also how to avoid being caught by the police. She additionally researched the serial killer with the highest known number of victims. At that point, she discovered the infamous murderer Harold Shipman, often called Dr. Death. He was officially connected to 28 murders, though some estimates suggest he may have been responsible for as many as 250. This exceptionally high victim count made him Domina's favorite serial killer. Besides using her internet browser so openly, Domina made several other serious mistakes. She openly expressed her desire to surpass Dr. Shipman's record as a serial killer. She immediately told her friend about this idea through social media. She then informed the friend who had helped her purchase the knife. At this stage, she needed to determine how to attract her victims. She decided to use dating websites. She believed that the internet was the ideal place to meet people. Through her online profiles, she thought she could lure men and ultimately kill them. Domina wanted to take as many lives as possible before being caught. She created and set up profiles on 2 dating sites simultaneously. On April 28, 2021, she presented herself as a sexy 19-year-old white girl, hoping to draw the attention of potential victims. After creating her profile, she quickly received a great deal of attention from men. Domina took her time carefully choosing the most suitable male targets. Over the next 3 days, she communicated with many unfamiliar men to decide who would be her primary choices for serial murder. Domina claimed that she had extensive experience interacting with men, while also stating that she was a virgin. One of the first individuals she communicated with was a man named Sam. After confirming that he was an adult, she arranged to meet him on May 3, 2021. The following day, May 4th, she met another man named Matt. During their meeting, he expressed a strong interest in sexual activity. Matt showed excitement about Domina's interests and her photograph, and proposed meeting her for sex in his car. However, she persuaded him to meet instead at a country house, and he agreed. Another man, Anthony, scheduled a meeting with Domina for May 5th. He was interested in playing the role of a sex slave, and even offered to give her his car. It is important to note that many men Domina communicated with made similar offers. Over the span of 3 days, she interacted with 224 potential victims, planning to kill at least one person per day. However, Domina revealed this mass murder plan to her friend through letters. Upon learning of her disturbing ideas, the friend dismissed Domina's statements. The friend knew that Domina often sought attention and had a habit of exaggerating or lying, which was not always taken seriously, especially when she made outrageous claims such as planning mass murders. During her correspondence with this friend, Domina mentioned a man named Zayed. All that is known about Zayed is that he was an immigrant from Iran who was 39 years old at the time he met Domina. Zayed had moved to Germany in 2014. He was the oldest individual among Domina's acquaintances. Zayed shared that he came from a family of 6 brothers and relocated to Germany after his parents passed away. He worked as a private security guard and spent his free time playing soccer, which was his favorite sport. Zayed was browsing dating sites when he came across a photograph of Domina. He had always dreamed of getting married and was intrigued by the young woman's proposal. They met on May 1st, and he messaged her at 10:53 a.m. Their conversation quickly gained momentum, and he mentioned that he owned a car. It is important to note that among the many men she communicated with, not all were simply seeking a casual encounter with a 19-year-old virgin. Zayed appeared to be genuinely in love with her and was looking for a serious relationship. However, in his search for a partner, he chose to take a risk without realizing that he was in grave danger. When Domina learned that Zayed had his own car, she suggested that they meet around 8 p.m. that same day. Zayed was supposed to pick her up at the nearest bus stop, and then they would drive to her house in the woods outside the city. Before Domina left to meet Zayed, she spent the day researching details for her upcoming crime. During her online searches, she wanted to learn how long it takes for a person to bleed to death and which types of injuries could cause it. She also researched ways to properly dispose of a body. During this time, her ex-boyfriend Leon came to collect his belongings. Domina suddenly felt a strong urge to hurt him out of anger. However, Leon had anticipated possible trouble and brought a friend with him. That friend stayed outside and was instructed that if Leon did not come out within 10 minutes, it would mean something had happened to him. When Domina saw Leon's friend in the yard, she decided not to harm Leon. Exactly at 8 p.m., as planned, Zayed arrived at the bus stop in his car. Domina quickly got into the vehicle and spoke cheerfully with him. They began flirting, and she did everything she could to make him feel comfortable and lower his guard. She told him that it would take about half an hour to drive to her house in the woods. In reality, she did not own any cabins or houses in the forest. Her sole objective was to lure Zayed away from the city to a secluded place to avoid drawing attention. Unfortunately, Zayed did not know it was all a deception and that he was in danger. After roughly 30 minutes of driving, they turned onto a dirt road. They went deeper into the woods and stopped. Domina distracted Zayed with her cell phone and suddenly stabbed him in the neck with a 30-centimeter knife. At that moment, her plan began to unravel because Zayed did not die instantly as she had expected. Instead, he fought back, which caused Domina to panic and flee, believing he would die from blood loss. However, Zayed managed to reach the highway and began signaling passing cars. Fortunately, a nurse was in the first vehicle that stopped to help him. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Zayed later fell into a coma, and doctors continued fighting to save his life. During this time, Domina wandered through the city. She returned on foot, barefoot, with her pantyhose torn. Domina walked along the street covered in blood, seemingly unaware of the people around her and muttering to herself. A witness who noticed her called the police. The incident occurred just 37 minutes after Domina attempted to kill her first victim, Zayed. When police responded to the report, they detained her in the neighboring city of Berman, where she was found covered in blood. They tried to determine what had happened, even suggesting that she might have killed someone in self-defense. However, Domina clearly stated that nothing like that had occurred. No one had attacked her, and she had only wanted to take another person's life. The police were shocked and arrested her. Meanwhile, doctors continued trying to save Zayed, but he remained in a coma. 2 weeks after the attack, his family arrived from Iran. His parents and siblings stayed near the hospital, praying for his recovery and speaking to him. Sadly, after 19 days in a coma, Zayed died. Domina's involvement in the crime was confirmed. She was found guilty of premeditated murder after his death. She showed no remorse for Zayed. Her only regret was that she had been caught by the police and was unable to carry out her plan to kill more victims. During her time in prison, Domina requested an orange robe like that worn by her idol. She also wanted to hang posters of serial killers in her cell, but this request was refused. Domina continued to behave erratically. During a visit from her mother, Domina asked her to carry out a mission, which was to kill Leon on her behalf. When Domina's trial began in 2022, she showed no remorse. She openly admitted her desire to become a serial killer, a desire that emerged after her ex-boyfriend Leon ended their relationship. As a result, she sought revenge against as many men as possible by planning to murder them. Domina was disappointed that her plan collapsed so quickly. Leon, who was facing serious accusations, including rape, took the stand to testify. During the proceedings, Domina lost control, trying to break free from her restraints and attack Leon. However, she was stopped before she could harm him. The prosecution argued that Domina posed a threat to society, as she had openly expressed a desire to kill innocent people. This claim was supported by her actions in killing Zayed, an Iranian immigrant. The court considered her circumstances, and Domina Cherry was found guilty of murder and sentenced to only 12 years in prison. After the verdict was announced, she displayed a pentagram on her hand to everyone in the courtroom, imitating a well-known photograph of her idol, Richard Ramirez. The judge interpreted this gesture as clear evidence of her ongoing desire for violence, reinforcing the seriousness of her case. The next person to appear in court was Domina's friend, Francisca. She chose not to inform the police about Domina's plans. Had she alerted the authorities, the murders could have been prevented. Although she could have faced a maximum sentence of 5 years, all charges against her were inexplicably dropped, leaving her without any consequences. Domina is not serving her sentence in prison. Instead, she has been sent to a psychiatric hospital. She will remain there until her treatment is completed. This means she could potentially stay there far longer than the original sentence imposed by the court, but only if her treatment proves to be ineffective. Moving on to the next case. The case of Hannah Anderson. The Anderson family was a typical American household. Parents Christina and Brett worked diligently to provide their children, Ethan and Hannah, with a comfortable life. Ethan liked activities such as fishing and playing racing video games with his friends, while Hannah, who was 16 years old, was interested in dancing, social media, and cheerleading. Like many teenagers, Hannah was carefree and unaware of the dangers of the world, never imagining that harm could come to her or her family. However, their lives were about to encounter a tragic event, as a sinister individual was secretly observing them and waiting for the ideal moment to act. Christina had been married briefly before meeting Brett. After her first marriage ended, she was energetic and lively, enjoying dance and fitness. She loved trying new activities and was searching for someone special to share her adventures with. Brett was intelligent, hardworking, friendly, and kind, and the two formed a quick connection. Their friendship soon developed into a romantic relationship. At the time they married, Brett worked in the telecommunications field. By the fall of 1996, Christina was expecting their first child. As the due date grew closer, the Andersons' 3-bedroom townhouse filled with anticipation and excitement from friends and family. On July 22, 1997, Hannah Anderson was born, immediately winning everyone over with her bright blue eyes and light-colored hair. Her birth was a joyful moment for the Andersons and their loved ones, marking an important milestone, and Christina, who was known for hosting gatherings and barbecues, had built a close-knit circle of friends and family. Brett's best friend, James Lee DiMaggio, was an important part of the family, sharing many outdoor adventures with Brett. In the beginning, Hannah would join her father and Uncle James, but as she grew older, she began spending more time with her mother and friends. Ethan, however, enjoyed going along with his dad and Uncle James on these outings. Born on October 8, 2004, Ethan was a brave boy who loved learning about sports and fishing from his father. During a difficult divorce, James found comfort and support in the kindness of the Andersons, who were always willing to help people in need. In 2009, he purchased a property in the Mountain Empire area of San Diego, California, about an hour away from where the Anderson family lived. It was a scenic 2-story log cabin with a private 3-car garage. The area was rural, with fewer than 400 residents, making it an ideal hunting retreat. After James fully furnished and decorated the cabin, he invited Brett, Christina, and their children to use it as a vacation home whenever they wished. Brett was dedicated to his job, often working long hours to support his family, which frequently kept him away from home. Likewise, Christina was busy with her work and caring for their children, leaving little time for other activities. Meanwhile, their teenage daughter Hannah was going through a stage where she wanted more independence and spent most of her time on her phone, deeply involved in social media. Despite Brett's demanding schedule, he always made sure to closely watch over Hannah, ensuring she stayed away from bad influences and remained within his safe limits. Hannah's best friend was Marissa Chavez. They shared many interests and were nearly inseparable, enjoying activities such as dance, cheerleading, hairstyling, fashion, makeup, and talking about boys. They loved being the center of attention. Hannah was intelligent, adventurous, cheerful, and outgoing, living life without worry. Her parents, Brett and Christina, supported her as she grew more independent and followed her interests. Hannah spent her time coaching young cheerleaders and enjoying quality moments with her younger brother, Ethan. In 2013, Hannah was in her sophomore year of high school in Lakeside, while her brother Ethan was attending Linda Lake Elementary School. During this period, Brett was experiencing difficulties at work and began searching for a new job. In April, he received a promising job offer, but it required him to spend long stretches away from home. After discussing the opportunity with Christina, they agreed it was the best decision for the family. He moved to Tennessee, but promised to return home to celebrate Hannah's 16th birthday, an occasion he was determined not to miss. While Brett was away, Christina relied more heavily on their circle of friends and family for support. Despite his own financial difficulties and the risk of losing his home, James offered his help. He even considered moving to Texas as a possible solution. Brett's absence did not lessen James's involvement with the Anderson family. James frequently drove Hannah and Ethan to their activities and kept them occupied, effectively becoming a second father figure to them. He also welcomed Hannah and her friends into his home, giving them a place to gather without their parents present. James set firm rules to maintain a safe environment for the teenagers while Brett was gone. No boys were allowed in the house, and his bedroom was strictly off-limits. Even so, he allowed some minor rules to be relaxed. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, Brett missed his family deeply and made it a habit to call them every other day to check on their well-being. He also stayed in close contact with James, updating him on his new work challenges and depending on him to keep Christina and the children safe and supported. Christina would drop Hannah off at the cheerleading gym in the morning, where Hannah coached younger cheerleaders. After the session ended at 4 p.m., Hannah would wait outside for Christina to pick her up and take her home. Hannah was looking forward to seeing Marissa at home, who was eagerly waiting to hear from her, but unfortunately, Marissa never received a message from Hannah. At around 8 p.m. on a Sunday, a resident of the Mountain Empire community called the San Diego County Sheriff's Office to report a house fire. The fire had spread to both the main house and a nearby smaller structure. Despite the firefighters' best efforts, the flames were initially difficult to control. The fire was particularly notable in the small town because of its severity. The upper level of the house had collapsed, and a gray SUV was discovered parked nearby. It took just 2 hours for firefighters to extinguish the blaze, even though the fire station was only a 3-minute drive away. Once the fire was under control, firefighters carried out a detailed interior search to determine if anyone was inside. While checking the smaller adjacent structure, a firefighter noticed a strip of green tarp. Upon closer examination, 2 legs were seen protruding from the entrance of the detached garage. A body was found beneath the tarp, lying face down, with the upper portion fused into the tarp, making it difficult at first to determine the sex. However, the clothing and hair indicated it was a woman. The fire had burned the area, melting the tarp into her hair, skin, and skull. A large amount of blood was found on the floor beneath the body, indicating a struggle before the fire. She had been restrained with rope tied around her body, duct tape wrapped several times around her mouth and neck, and her ankles bound with white plastic rope. A small brown dog was discovered hiding under a sleeping bag next to the woman's body. The license plate from the burned-out SUV was identified as belonging to Christina Anderson, leading to the assumption that her remains had been found. The medical examiner's investigation revealed that Christina had suffered a severe throat injury. When Brett was informed of the discovery and the violent circumstances of his wife's death, he was overcome with grief, still reeling from the shocking news delivered by the police. The enormity of the situation left him struggling to comprehend how such a horrific event could have occurred in their own garage, with no sign of their children or James. Brett was consumed by a sense of helplessness, haunted by the reality that he was not present to protect his family when they needed him most. The involvement of their family dog, C, compounded his anguish, leaving him to wonder how such cruelty could be inflicted upon those he loved. As the investigation commenced, detectives determined that Christina Anderson, a 42-year-old woman, was the victim. Her two children, 16-year-old Hannah and 8-year-old Ethan, were both missing. The crime scene was located at the home of James Lee DiMaggio, a close friend of the family and the property owner. James, 40, was also missing, along with his blue Nissan car bearing California license plates. As this information emerged, it captured Brett's attention. Although he did not want to suspect his best friend, the discovery of Christina's body in James' garage, coupled with the disappearance of his children and James himself, compelled Brett to take action. Brett promptly boarded a flight to San Diego, preparing to confront the disturbing possibility that his friend might be involved. Police canvassed the area around James' home, speaking with neighbors who reported seeing Christina, Ethan, and the family dog entering the house the previous night. That evening coincided with a farewell party James had held before his planned move to Texas. In response, California issued an Amber Alert, a nationwide system for notifying the public about child abductions. News of the alert quickly spread through social media, prompting the community to assist in the search. Marissa, one of Hannah's closest friends and classmates, took a lead role in distributing flyers throughout the area. During a detailed investigation of James' burned-down home, fire investigators made a disturbing discovery: the severely burned body of another victim, believed to be Ethan, the child. Brett was left in shock at the news, struggling to process the reality. As the harsh truth sank in, that he would never see his son again, his grief became overwhelming, and he broke down. His only remaining hope centered on Hannah. Having already lost his wife, son, and family pet, the thought of losing his daughter as well was unbearable. If James had indeed abducted Hannah following his actions against Christina and Ethan, she was in extreme danger. Detectives sought to determine the whereabouts of Hannah and James by interviewing everyone connected to them, including friends, relatives, and associates. James had been a constant figure in Hannah's life since her birth, serving as a father figure, a role the entire Anderson family respected. While most believed an external party had caused harm and taken them, no one knew who that individual might be. As of August 5th, neither James nor Hannah had been located, and their phones remained inactive. Media outlets published photographs and detailed descriptions, urging the public to report any sightings. California's alert system was fully operational, capable of issuing nationwide notifications through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. With no other apparent suspects, investigators turned their focus to James. The discovery of several trash bags filled with new camping equipment in the attic of the garage suggested he had been preparing to live off the grid. Among the seized items were a portable stove, packaging from a hunting knife, and a box of handcuffs, leading authorities to suspect that James had taken Hannah to a remote location, possibly intending to flee to Mexico or Canada. The search also revealed additional concerning items, including explosives, gasoline containers, and a tarp. Authorities also discovered numerous letters written by Hannah that James had kept for unknown reasons, the details of which were withheld from the public. The investigation sought to determine why James might have abducted Hannah. It was soon revealed that the fire had been deliberately set using an explosive device with detonators, indicating that the act had been premeditated. James' acquaintances confirmed that he possessed wilderness survival skills, suggesting he might be evading capture in remote areas with Hannah. The case drew international attention in 2013, sparking a global search for James. At a press conference, Brett directly addressed James, pleading with him to release his daughter. He implored his former friend to spare Hannah's life, noting that he had already suffered tremendous losses. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the Pine Valley checkpoint near James' home, which showed James' vehicle with Hannah sitting beside him on August 4th. This sighting occurred after Hannah was last seen but before the fire, offering some hope regarding her condition. By the time James picked Hannah up from middle school at 4 p.m., both of their phones had been turned off. Nevertheless, records showed that James and Hannah had exchanged 13 phone calls prior to that. The discovery of Hannah's letters in James' attic, along with evidence of their shared outings, fueled media speculation about a possible inappropriate connection between James and Hannah. Marissa provided investigators with a crucial lead, recounting a car trip during which James' behavior seemed unusual. During this trip, he revealed strong feelings for Hannah, suggesting he wanted to pursue a romantic relationship with her. This portrayal indicated that James was intensely infatuated with Hannah. As Hannah grew and began establishing distance, investigators theorized that James' obsession might have driven him to extreme, impulsive actions. His motivation, according to this theory, was to isolate Hannah from others, potentially explaining the arson and possibly even Christina's death. It was theorized that Christina may have witnessed something between James and Hannah that threatened his unrealistic plans, ultimately resulting in her tragic death. A new break in the case occurred on Wednesday, August 7th, in Idaho. The previous day, a group of experienced outdoor enthusiasts, including 71-year-old former Sheriff Mark John, his spouse, and another couple, embarked on a horseback ride in the remote Boise National Forest. This region, known as the River of No Return, is notorious for its rugged terrain. During their ride, they encountered two hikers, a man and a young woman, whose attire was unusual. The girl wore pajamas and tennis shoes, while the man wore a gray sweatshirt and sneakers. Neither hiker had rain gear, and they had set up camp on a ridge with no water access, indicating their inexperience. Observers noted the man's controlling behavior, pulling the girl close, and the couple's deliberate avoidance of contact with others. The girl was holding a cat in her arms. What the onlookers did not realize at the time was that the pair were the subjects of a nationwide search. It was only after returning home and seeing a news report about James and Hannah that they recognized the couple and immediately contacted law enforcement. The detail of the girl holding a cat was particularly significant, as it matched reports of a missing pet from James' household following the fire, a cat shared between Hannah and him. On Friday, a large law enforcement contingent assembled in Cascade, Idaho, to search a rugged area near the River of No Return. The terrain, difficult to access, spans dense forests, towering mountains, and deep valleys where cell phone signals are undetectable, making it an ideal hiding place. A search team composed of state police, FBI agents, and local law enforcement scoured over 400 miles of this challenging landscape and discovered a blue Nissan, easily identifiable due to its missing license plates. The vehicle was quickly identified as James despite being camouflaged with branches, leaves, and other natural materials. On Saturday, August 10, 2013, a U.S. Marshals Service aircraft conducting an aerial reconnaissance over the forest north of McKay Lake made a critical discovery. The crew spotted a two-person blue tent and two individuals nearby. A man was removing his shirt while a woman stood close by. Notably, the woman drew the pilot's attention by frantically signaling for help with a piece of fabric during the flyover. The two were later confirmed to be James and Hannah, marking a pivotal moment in the search operation. The FBI's hostage rescue team carefully positioned themselves in the area, awaiting the optimal moment to rescue Hannah from her captor. As the sun began to set, the team saw their opportunity. When James, Hannah's abductor, entered the forest to gather firewood, the team acted. Hannah quickly spotted her rescuers and ran toward them. However, James also noticed the team and fired his gun. The team returned fire, striking James multiple times. Despite efforts to save him, he succumbed to his injuries. Once Hannah reached the safety of the rescue team, she appeared physically unharmed but visibly shocked, clinging tightly to the agents, her body trembling and eyes wide. The rescue team immediately transported Hannah to a nearby Idaho hospital, where her father was waiting. Before Brett arrived, the FBI delivered devastating news to Hannah. Her mother and brother had not survived the fire. Hannah was now prepared to give a statement to authorities about the events, but with James deceased, some details remained unclear. She recalled that the incident began on August 3rd, when James hosted a farewell gathering at his home before leaving for Texas. Christina, Ethan, and the family dog attended, but Hannah was not invited. When she learned James would be picking her up instead of her mother, she felt uneasy. During the car ride, James got lost, forcing Hannah to call him multiple times to guide him. At first, she felt at ease, sharing laughs and jokes with him. However, upon arriving at his home, she sensed something was wrong. Her mother and younger brother were nowhere to be seen, though their belongings were scattered around. Concern grew as she noticed her mother's purse, containing money and cards, left on the floor. James' demeanor changed suddenly, presenting Hannah with handcuffs, his eyes vacant and emotionless, as if controlled by someone or something else. She had never seen him behave this way before, and the sudden change was deeply unsettling. James claimed her mother and brother were safe in the garage with the dog, urging her not to worry. After being forced to take several pills, Hannah lost consciousness. She later woke up in James' car surrounded by empty Red Bull cans, soon falling asleep again, likely due to a sedative. Earlier, James had threatened retaliation if she attempted to signal for help, keeping her fearful. Even in private moments, he closely monitored her in the forest. Hannah found escape nearly impossible due to heavy rain, inadequate clothing, and the burden of a heavy backpack. Lacking wilderness survival skills, she felt utterly hopeless and unsure how to flee. However, when James moved out of sight behind trees, she seized the opportunity to signal a passing U.S. Marshals Service plane for help. Questions remained about why Hannah was still wearing pajamas, given she had attended school earlier that day. She spent several days recovering in the hospital before returning to San Diego with her father. The Anderson family struggled to shield Hannah from intrusive media attention. Despite his immense grief and loss, Brett Anderson displayed remarkable resilience, finding comfort in watching his daughter grow, heal, and move forward to a happy, fulfilling life. Moving on to the next case. The case of Karen Marie Umphry. More than 4 decades have passed since Karen Marie Umphry, a young girl, mysteriously vanished and became the victim of 2 cold-blooded killers. Her body was located in a wildlife sanctuary, yet the identity of her killers remained unknown for over 40 years. Despite extensive investigative efforts during this period, the killers were never apprehended, leaving her family devastated and with numerous unanswered questions. However, in 2022, due to advancements in technology and forensic investigation techniques, the case was resolved, providing clarity after years without answers. Karen Marie Umphry was born on May 14, 1959, in Almont, Lapeer County, Michigan, USA, to parents Vincent Umphry and Sylvia Lorraine Zwilk Umphry. She graduated from Marysville High School in 1977 and subsequently worked as a secretary for Marysville Marine Distributors. Karen's life encountered tragedy on November 2, 1980, when she was only 21 years old. That evening, she and her boyfriend, Fred Hill, were driving home from a party in Port Huron. Between 12:30 and 2:30 a.m., the two had an argument. As a result, Fred exited the car and began walking home, prompting Karen to park the car and follow him on foot. Around 3:30 a.m. that morning, a driver contacted the Port Huron police to report that he had seen a woman being forced into a pickup truck near where Karen's car was parked. On the same day, Karen's body was found at Beards Hills Wildlife Sanctuary in Michigan near Port Huron. She had been struck in the head with a weapon, tragically ending the life of a young and promising individual, and the identity of Karen's killer remained unknown for many years after the incident. Although investigators pursued relentless efforts to identify a suspect, the case made no progress. For more than 40 years, they continued searching for the truth, striving to bring justice for Karen and her family. By 2022, Detective Ed Silver assumed responsibility for resolving this case, determined to uncover the truth. He began a thorough review of the entire case file, applying new technology and advanced methods to examine DNA evidence while revisiting all information collected over the previous 41 years. Also in 2022, the Michigan State Police transferred evidence from the crime scene to Othram, a company specializing in forensic genetic analysis. Othram created a complete DNA profile belonging to an unidentified suspect and employed forensic genetic genealogy to generate new investigative leads in the case. Based on these leads, the Michigan State Police, in coordination with the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department, identified Douglas Laming, 70 years old, from Fort Gracia, Michigan, as a suspect in Karen's murder. Additionally, DNA evidence discovered on Karen's clothing at the time of the incident matched Douglas's DNA. Although reports described Karen as a victim of abuse, Douglas informed detectives that he and Karen had a consensual, intimate relationship. He was subsequently arrested on December 15, 2023, and charged with first-degree murder. He is currently being held on a $2 million bond. In 2023, a year after the investigation was reopened, the Michigan State Police, MSP, submitted additional DNA evidence from the 1980 crime scene to Othram. A second DNA profile, belonging to another unidentified suspect, was developed using forensic-grade genome sequencing. Othram's internal forensic genealogy team used this profile to generate new investigative leads, which were then returned to the Michigan State Police. With these leads, the Michigan State Police continued collaborating with investigators from the St. Clair County Sheriff's Office to expand the investigation. Detectives from the St. Clair County Sheriff's Office subsequently interviewed several individuals connected to Karen or the suspects from the 1980s, gathering information and establishing key contacts. This follow-up investigation resulted in the identification of Anthony Harris, 63 years old, as the second suspect in Karen's murder. He was arrested at his workplace on February 6, 2024. The following day, he appeared in court and was charged with murder at the 71st District Court in Port Huron. This charge pertained to the death of Karen. His bail was set at $2 million. On October 7th, Anthony pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and agreed to testify against his accomplice, Douglas Laming. In his testimony to police, Anthony stated that on November 2, 1980, he abducted Karen, forced her into Douglas's car, and they transported her to the state hunting area at Beards Hills. There, they took turns abusing her. Additionally, Anthony informed police that shortly after leaving, he heard 2 gunshots, but due to the darkness, he was uncertain whether Douglas was the one who fired the weapon. Shortly thereafter, on October 8, Douglas Laming's trial commenced. During the trial, Karen's family received detailed information regarding the evidence collected over the years. This included photographs, testimonies, and other pieces of evidence presented in the case. Notably, there was information concerning DNA evidence discovered on Karen's body, which matched the DNA of Anthony and Douglas. This evidence demonstrated their involvement in her death. After a 2-day trial, on Thursday, October 10, 2024, the jury convened to deliberate, and within an hour, they returned a guilty verdict. Douglas maintained his innocence and told the court that he and Karen had a consensual, intimate relationship. He denied any involvement in her death. However, the jury did not accept his defense. Ultimately, they found Douglas Laming guilty of first-degree murder. Anthony Harris is scheduled to be sentenced at 1:35 p.m. on November 12, 2024, and Douglas Laming will be sentenced at 1:35 p.m. on November 18, 2024. Both face life imprisonment. Douglas then joined the court via Zoom with his attorney, Frederick Lepley, to request that the hearing be postponed until after New Year's Eve. Judge Russell Etheridge and the prosecution agreed to the postponement. Etheridge scheduled a temporary conference for 9 a.m. on January 2nd. Additionally, Douglas's charge was amended from first-degree murder to open murder. After 44 years, Karen's family can finally breathe a sigh of relief knowing that the killers have been brought to justice. Karen's family expressed hope that the convictions of Douglas and Anthony will bring peace to Fred Hill, Karen's boyfriend, who had been a suspect in the case due to an argument with her at a party on the night she died. The investigation by the St. Clair County Sheriff's Office cleared Fred from the list of suspects, but for many years, unfounded doubts and accusations negatively affected him and his family. They sincerely hope that Fred can find peace after years of suffering and injustice. The case of Karen Marie Humphrey serves not only as a lesson about the importance of preserving and analyzing evidence, but also demonstrates the power of technology in solving long-standing cold cases. After years of unsuccessful investigation, this case seemed unlikely ever to be resolved. However, due to the perseverance of the investigators and the application of modern forensic genetic technology, justice was finally served after more than 4 decades. Moving on to the next case. The case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, as the second child of Samantha Ingram, who dreamed of becoming a model and dancer. Growing up, Kelsey had an older brother named Colin. After her birth, the family relocated to Jonesboro, Arkansas, a small industrial town where Kelsey spent most of her early years. However, her family life was disrupted when her parents divorced a few years later. Following the divorce, her father moved back to Virginia. Kelsey grew into an attractive young woman with a flawless figure and striking features that could easily have supported a modeling career. However, she disliked school and preferred spending time with friends, dating, and attending different social gatherings. Her main goal was to become famous, appear on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk red carpets at major events. Despite this ambition, Kelsey lacked genuine talent and depended largely on her youth and appearance to get by. While attending high school, she started going to modeling auditions in hopes of launching a career. Her mother, Samantha, who had always dreamed of being a model herself, was pleased to support her daughter's aspirations. Unfortunately, Kelsey's modeling work amounted to only a handful of small photo shoots for clothing catalogs. Kelsey married Jerry Turner at the age of 18 while she was already pregnant. Their daughter, Beverly, was born shortly after the marriage. However, the marriage was short-lived and ended in divorce. By the time she was 20, after abandoning her modeling ambitions, Kelsey chose to pursue work as a men's magazine model. She quickly attracted the attention of several men's publications. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a successful career and a gateway to the lifestyle she had always wanted. Over the years, Kelsey received multiple modeling offers and opportunities, including photo shoots for well-known magazines such as Playboy and Maxim, as well as a shoot for 110 magazine. She often traveled to major cities like Los Angeles and Las Vegas to chase these opportunities. In an interview, Kelsey described herself as a curvy blonde with a slim waist and reflected on her carefree nature, explaining that she enjoyed having fun, partying with friends, and living life to the fullest. Kelsey was not particularly worried about the future. She frequently changed partners and quickly spent any money she earned or received from admirers. At 23, Kelsey became pregnant again and gave birth to a son named Josh. The child's father refused to marry her or acknowledge his son. As modeling opportunities declined, Kelsey turned to social media to grow an audience. She actively managed her accounts, posting provocative photos in swimsuits, lingerie, or with only partial coverage of her private areas. Kelsey carefully crafted a flawless online persona. Her heavily edited photos made her appear glamorous, and her social media pages highlighted visits to luxury boutiques, fashionable nightclubs, and other upscale locations. However, this polished online image concealed the real difficulties she faced as a single mother of two. Despite appearing affluent, her actual life was challenging because she managed money poorly and often spent all of her earnings at once. Around 2016, Kelsey encountered serious problems after a tragic incident involving her daughter. The child experienced severe trauma that left her withdrawn and unable to speak. An acquaintance suggested that she take her daughter to see a psychiatrist. As a result, she contacted the well-known pediatric psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Burchard, who practiced in Monterey, California, to treat her daughter. Dr. Thomas Burchard was a highly regarded pediatric psychiatrist born on February 16, 1948, in Boston, Massachusetts. He was the son of a distinguished architect and engineer, and his family later moved to Virginia. Although his father taught architecture at prestigious universities, including Harvard, Thomas chose a different direction and pursued a medical career focused on child psychology. After completing medical school, Dr. Thomas served as a resident in pediatric psychiatry at several leading hospitals and taught at universities throughout the country. He eventually settled at a public clinical hospital on California's Monterey Peninsula, where he spent over 40 years working as a pediatric psychiatrist, establishing an impeccable reputation for his remarkable ability to connect with young patients and manage even the most complicated and severe cases. He earned his doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley. Thomas was known to be kind, intelligent, and extraordinarily generous. His compassionate personality drove him to help people in need, particularly young patients whose parents were unable to afford therapy. He also paid for hospital care for ill children from low-income families and supported single mothers. Dr. Thomas had a longtime companion named Dee, who worked as an assistant, housekeeper, and possibly more. As someone who knew him closely, she was the first to notice changes in his behavior that indicated early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As Dr. Thomas entered his 70s, he became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and distracted. To conceal these symptoms from his colleagues, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record important information such as names, dates, and events. He always carried a notebook in his breast pocket that contained sensitive details, including bank information, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. When Kelsey first visited Dr. Thomas with her daughter, she shared her struggles as a single mother and explained that she could not afford his services. However, the doctor offered to treat her for free and even gave Kelsey $300 to help support her children. Kelsey was shocked at first, but soon realized that by telling emotional stories about her difficult life, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. Kelsey prepared a detailed plan for her next visit with Dr. Thomas. During that appointment, she told a heartbreaking story about her youngest son's illness and her lack of money to buy costly medication for him. She named a specific amount of money that she needed, and to her surprise, she received the full sum from Dr. Thomas. Kelsey continued to invent false and emotional stories during subsequent visits. She would describe various hardships and receive increasingly large amounts of money from this trusting doctor. Of course, she did not spend the money on her children, but instead used it for her own enjoyment and designer clothing. Not wanting to return to her hometown of Virginia, Kelsey asked Thomas to pay for her rent in California, claiming that she could find work there more easily and that the climate was better for her children. Thomas agreed and paid for the apartment she selected. Some people suspected that the doctor was having an affair with Kelsey, a young blonde model, and that this was why he continually granted her requests. However, Kelsey insisted that Thomas treated her and her children like family and acted out of kindness rather than love. Thomas provided Kelsey and her children with housing, paid their expenses, and gave them a substantial amount of money for their needs. He also leased her a luxury Mercedes-Benz convertible. Over time, Kelsey realized that her modeling career had ended and that her youth was fading. Despite this, she made no attempt to find another job and instead depended entirely on Dr. Thomas for financial support. During this period, he spent approximately $500,000 on Kelsey and her children. However, she squandered that money on personal indulgences such as breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to revive her modeling career. Kelsey's excessive spending and party-centered lifestyle resulted in her neglecting her children. This ultimately led to her ex-husband, who obtained sole custody of their daughter through the courts, having Kelsey stripped of her parental rights. As a result, Kelsey was left with only her youngest son. Thomas was enraged when he learned about the situation, but his anger was directed at Kelsey rather than at her ex-husband. It was evident that Kelsey had neglected her children and had used money intended for their care to support her extravagant lifestyle. Dr. Thomas chose to confront the issue with Kelsey, telling her that he would no longer finance her extravagant and unproductive lifestyle. However, Kelsey responded by threatening to spread false allegations that Dr. Thomas had inappropriate feelings toward his young patients. Although he knew these claims were untrue, Dr. Thomas understood that any rumors of this nature could severely harm his reputation as a respected pediatric psychiatrist and academic. Confronted with this threat, Dr. Burchard reluctantly gave in to Kelsey's demands and continued providing her with financial support. In 2019, Kelsey relocated to Las Vegas with her son in an attempt to revive her modeling career, and she expected Thomas, whom she was blackmailing, to pay for the effort. As directed, Thomas rented a house for her and supplied the requested money. However, after receiving the financial assistance, Kelsey vanished for 2 months, and her whereabouts were unknown. Later that year, in February, Kelsey resurfaced and contacted Thomas in an emotional state, claiming that she was seriously ill, unable to work, and facing extreme financial hardship. When Thomas refused to help, Kelsey's demeanor changed entirely, and she continued to threaten and blackmail him. Judy, who was close to Thomas, urged him to report Kelsey's behavior to the police and to contact Child Protective Services because of concerns about Kelsey's ability to care for her younger son, especially given that she had previously lost parental rights to her older daughter. Dr. Thomas began preparing in case the dispute with Kelsey escalated into a legal battle. He informed his colleagues about the situation, and they agreed to support him. Judy had earlier tried to resolve the matter by speaking directly with Kelsey, but her attempts only led to Kelsey issuing threats of retaliation. Thomas decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims. Judy tried to discourage him, but he was determined to go to Las Vegas to meet with Kelsey. Judy also offered to go with him for support as a friend, but Dr. Thomas insisted on dealing with the situation on his own. He finally departed on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists became lost while traveling through Nevada. While attempting to reach Lake Mead, they turned onto a dirt road off the main highway. There, they discovered a Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the desert. The roof was closed and the windows were rolled up, but strangely, no one was nearby. Curious, the tourists cautiously approached the vehicle and noticed that one of the windows was broken. Upon closer inspection, they looked inside and observed signs of a struggle. Blood stains covered the interior. The tourists quickly contacted the police to report their disturbing discovery. Officers arrived at the scene around noon and encountered an unbearable odor. The source of the smell was soon identified when police opened the trunk. Inside, they found the body of an elderly man concealed beneath a pile of furniture and rags. Next to him was a blood-stained baseball bat. The victim was later identified as Dr. Thomas, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported Dr. Thomas missing on March 2nd after she was unable to reach him at their scheduled meeting time. She immediately feared something terrible had occurred and contacted the police, hoping he would be found alive. The autopsy revealed numerous severe injuries on Thomas's body. These injuries included scratches, bruises, and shallow cuts, along with a serious head wound that may have been caused by the baseball bat found in the trunk beside him. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands showed multiple cuts that indicated a desperate attempt to defend himself. Thomas's face also displayed visible bruising with a distinctive patterned imprint. Most disturbing was the evidence showing that he had been placed in the trunk of the car while still alive and injured, eventually suffocating due to the extreme desert heat. The investigation centered on Kelsey Turner as the primary suspect, since the car at the crime scene had been rented in her name. Judy had provided police with Kelsey's address, which matched the location Dr. Thomas had visited. However, when officers arrived, they found the house empty. Although no one was present, the house showed evidence of a hurried cleanup. Containers of cleaning supplies were scattered throughout the residence, and the air carried a strong odor of household chemicals, suggesting that someone had attempted to eliminate traces of the crime. The house had been occupied by Kelsey, her 4-year-old son, and her new boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, along with 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Yerrick. All of them had fled, making them suspects, as Kelsey could not have inflicted such injuries on the doctor or placed his body in the trunk of her car by herself. Jeremy Yerrick was the only individual interviewed by police. He stated that he and his girlfriend had left Kelsey's house while the doctor was still alive. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had been drinking heavily and began flirting with Thomas, attempting to extort money from him in a manner similar to Kelsey's tactics. This enraged Kelsey, who accused Jeremy's girlfriend of trying to take Thomas away from her. The situation escalated, and Jeremy was forced to quickly remove his girlfriend from the house to avoid a physical altercation. He did not return for several days and claimed he did not know what occurred after his departure. During the investigation, police learned from Judy that Dr. Thomas carried a notebook containing his bank account information and passwords, which he frequently misplaced. When investigators searched for it, they discovered that the notebook was missing. Furthermore, 2 of Dr. Thomas's bank accounts showed large withdrawals on March 3rd, after which his accounts and cards were promptly shut down. On March 21st, police in Stockton, California, arrested Kelsey and her boyfriend while they were attempting to withdraw money again. It was later revealed that the couple had been staying in different motels with a child, paying in cash, and moving from place to place. They initially tried to empty all of Thomas's accounts but failed. They then attempted to take out additional funds with plans to flee to Mexico, but those plans were thwarted when the accounts were closed. Diana, a neighbor who had been at Kelsey's house that night, cooperated with investigators and provided her account of what occurred on the night of March 7th. According to her statement, the trouble began after Jeremy and his girlfriend departed. Kelsey became involved in a heated argument with Dr. Thomas, who refused to give her any money. Kelsey threatened to destroy the doctor's reputation by spreading rumors about inappropriate behavior with young patients. As the confrontation intensified, Kelsey grew aggressive. Dr. Thomas, feeling endangered, locked himself in his room. However, John forced the door open with a powerful shoulder strike, and then struck Thomas forcefully with a baseball bat. This caused a serious injury, producing a large hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana ran in, begging everyone to calm down. Seeing the doctor's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, fearing the consequences of what they had done. After Thomas stated that he would report to the police that he had been attacked and robbed by strangers, the four went to the garage. Diana was ordered by Kelsey to go back into the house and clean up, removing all traces of blood. Diana followed these orders and began cleaning, but soon heard screams and the sounds of a struggle coming from the garage. She rushed back and found the couple viciously attacking Dr. Thomas inside the car. The doctor was trapped and unable to escape or defend himself. It became evident that Kelsey and John had no intention of taking Thomas to the hospital. Instead, they planned to kill him using a baseball bat, a small knife, and John's unloaded pistol, leaving distinctive bruises on the doctor's face. Diana was then told to return to the house and continue cleaning. Afraid for her own safety, she obeyed and left the garage. While Diana was still cleaning, she heard the couple's vehicle drive away. Several hours later, John's car returned with Kelsey, but the other vehicle, a convertible, was missing. Diana did not know where the convertible was until she later learned about a car discovered in the desert with a body in its trunk. From the beginning, Diana chose to cooperate with law enforcement by accepting a plea deal and sharing all the relevant information she had. As a result, she received a reduced sentence for tampering with evidence and served only 3 years in prison. John Logan Kennison was convicted of murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Kelsey Turner's case was more complex. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which caused significant delays in the legal proceedings. While incarcerated, she gave birth to a baby girl who, along with her son, was placed in the care of social services, as none of Kelsey's relatives were willing to assume responsibility. In January 2023, Kelsey Turner was sentenced to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving at least 10 years. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Correctional Center for Women in Las Vegas. Moving on to the next case. The case of Margaret Rudin. Margaret Rudin was born on May 31, 1943, in Memphis, Tennessee. She is one of 3 daughters in her family. Her family moved frequently, and before finishing high school, she had lived in 15 different states. Ronald Rudin, born on November 13, 1930, in Chicago, rose to become a construction magnate during the Las Vegas real estate boom of the 1980s and 1990s. With an estimated net worth of $11 million, he was a powerful figure in the community. As Ronald's business ventures in Las Vegas prospered, he noticed that his romantic life was not going well. His third wife, Peggy June Lee Rudin, suffered from depression and was found dead at their home due to head trauma. Although police initially suspected Ronald's involvement in the case, they ultimately confirmed that she had taken her own life. After divorcing his fourth wife, Ronald met Margaret in 1987 at the First Church of Religious Science in Las Vegas. Margaret shared that she was drawn to his charm, intelligence, and sophistication. She had been through 4 previous marriages. After meeting Ronald, they quickly fell in love and married on September 11, 1987. However, their marriage was far from smooth. Margaret stated that her husband Ronald had once confessed to killing Peggy. Furthermore, there were rumors about Ronald's infidelities, which she denied. Their relationship became even more strained when she accidentally overheard him talking with an ex-girlfriend. By 1991, Ronald accused Margaret of becoming increasingly aggressive and violent. He warned that if he were murdered, a thorough investigation should be conducted. In that case, anyone named in his will would not inherit his estate. However, 2 years later, their marriage seemed to have improved as Margaret's share of the estate increased from 40% to 60%. Suddenly, on December 18, 1994, Ronald went missing. Margaret stated that the last time she saw him was at the opening of an antique store in the shopping center he owned. When she returned home around 2 a.m. on December 19th, she discovered that her husband and his car were no longer there and the alarm was off. Although she found this unusual, she did not pay much attention and went to bed. The next morning, when Ronald did not show up for work, Margaret sensed that something was wrong with her husband. She contacted colleagues and family before attempting to report Ronald's disappearance to the police. However, The police requested that she wait 48 hours before filing a report. 4 days later, on December 22, 1994, the police found Ronald's Cadillac at the Crazy Horse 2 Club on the Las Vegas Strip. The car was covered in dust and mud, with muddy footprints inside. However, none of the footprints belonged to Ronald. Furthermore, neither his nor Margaret's fingerprints were found in the vehicle. Weeks passed with no new information about the case. On January 3, 1995, Ronald's estate managers announced a $1.25 million reward for anyone who provided information leading to his whereabouts. On the night of January 21, 1995, there was a major breakthrough in the case. Fishermen returning from a nearby river discovered Ronald's skull 60 miles from Las Vegas. The skull had 4 bullet holes in it, and a diamond bracelet belonging to Ronald was also found. Nearby, investigators soon located the rest of his remains scattered around, as well as hidden inside a charred old trunk. Some began to speculate that the trunk belonged to Margaret because she owned an antique shop. 2 days later, the police received a call from a repairman named Augustine Lovato. He reported that Margaret had hired him to work at her home just days after her husband went missing. During the job, he discovered traces of blood in both the bedroom and the bathroom. This testimony further increased suspicions about Margaret. During the interrogation, Margaret stated that she had hired Augustine, but not to renovate her house. However, Augustine's call led police to believe that Margaret may have attacked and killed Ronald in their bedroom. Ultimately, Augustine received a $1.25 million reward posted by Ronald's estate managers. Although police discovered blood in the room, an expert indicated that the quantity of blood was minimal. Additionally, a defense expert claimed there was no evidence of any cleanup following the incident. If Ronald had indeed been killed in the bedroom, there would certainly have been more evidence. Currently, police continue their investigation, which includes testing semen found on the floor. Even without forensic evidence linking Margaret to her husband's death at that time, she remained a suspect. In January 1996, nearly 2 years after the discovery of Ronald's remains, Margaret fought with her husband's trustees to obtain his share of the estate under his will. Of her husband's $1 million assets, Margaret agreed on $600,000, but after deducting legal fees, she only received $179,000. The investigation has since stalled, and police are still searching for the crucial piece of evidence, the murder weapon. On July 21, 1996, a diver accidentally discovered a weapon at Lake Mead that could be connected to Ronald. This weapon was later confirmed to be the instrument of death. A bullet found in Ronald's skull matched this weapon. Detectives also discovered that Ronald had reported a similar weapon missing shortly after his separation from Margaret, leading them to suspect that she may have taken the weapon and used it to kill her husband. For 2 years, prosecutors attempted to prosecute Margaret, but without success. However, a year later, on April 17, 1997, a grand jury issued a murder indictment against Margaret. An arrest warrant was issued for her. When investigators called her attorney to serve the arrest warrant, they realized she had fled a month before the indictment was issued. She spent over 2.5 years in hiding until she was arrested in Massachusetts on November 19, 1999, and extradited to Nevada to face murder charges in the death of her husband. Margaret appeared in court on March 2, 2001. Her defense claimed that her husband was killed due to illegal activities in which he was involved. However, the prosecutor argued that she had killed her husband to prevent him from divorcing her and to gain control of his assets. The charred trunk where Ronald's body was found became a key piece of evidence for the prosecution. Antique dealer Bruce Honenbach testified early in the trial that he had sold Margaret a trunk. However, many months later, antique dealer Donald Schoppeter spoke out to assert that Bruce was mistaken about the chest. Donald stated from the witness stand that Bruce had confused the chest he sold to Margaret. The prosecution, believing that Margaret must have had assistance disposing of Ronald's body, called Yehuda Sharon, a friend of Margaret's, to the stand. The police had been monitoring both of them after Ronald went missing, and the prosecution alleged that they were romantically involved. However, both Yehuda and Margaret denied having an affair. The prosecution informed Yehuda that he would be granted full immunity if he testified against Margaret. Nevertheless, Yehuda revealed nothing while on the stand. He denied any involvement in Ronald's murder and had never been charged in connection with the case. After hearing the arguments of both sides, the jury found Margaret guilty on May 2, 2001. Finally, on August 31, 2001, Margaret Rudin was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. She had been offered multiple plea deals, but turned them down. As the years went by, the lingering question of whether Margaret received a fair trial remained. Even while behind bars, she never gave up proving her innocence. She filed appeals to overturn the verdict, but they were dismissed in 2002. In 2008, Margaret was retried. Clark County Judge Sally Lower determined that Margaret's attorneys had not been adequately prepared to defend her at her 2001 trial. The judge also noted that Michael Amador, her lead attorney at the time, had been ineffective. On April 26, 2011, Margaret filed a petition in federal court seeking a personal protection order, requesting a retrial and the overturning of her conviction. She argued about the ineffective assistance of her defense lawyer, the allowance of improper testimony, erroneous jury instructions, and several other issues. On January 25, 2012, U.S. District Judge Roger L. Hunt dismissed Margaret's habeas corpus petition, issuing a decision not allowing an appeal. Judge Hunt stated that her petition had been filed late. This decision set the stage for an appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco. Margaret Rudin, after being convicted of murder in 2001, has always maintained her innocence, despite spending over 20 years in prison. In 2022, the U.S. District Court in Nevada ruled that Margaret did not receive a fair trial and had been wrongfully convicted. Judge Richard F. Boulware vacated Margaret's sentence, as she was now 78 years old after spending 20 years in confinement. He pointed out that she had not received adequate legal support from her lawyer. The charges against Margaret were dismissed on December 9, 2024. Judge Boulware noted that the lack of evidence in the 10-week trial against Margaret in 2003 was the reason he decided to overturn the conviction. Police did not find any physical evidence linking Margaret to her husband's death. Additionally, Judge Boulware felt that lawyer Amador had not fully fulfilled his responsibilities in protecting Margaret's rights. Throughout her time in prison, Margaret became an advocate for prison reform and the rights of inmates. Nevertheless, she endured 20 years in an unjust system. Currently, she wishes to reclaim what she lost. Reflecting on her time in prison, Margaret shared that to get through the tough times, she often thought about the good things and the values she still holds. She hopes to find more positive things in this world. Currently, Margaret is suing the state of Nevada for her wrongful imprisonment of over 20 years. Moving on to the next case. The case of Maria Kittabe. In 2003, Dr. Paul Jarrett was 82 years old. Despite his advanced age, he remained strong and healthy. He was a respected professor of psychiatry, well known in the region. From a young age, he had aspired to succeed in this field. He pursued education, secured a position at a clinic, and eventually, after gaining experience, established his own practice. His successful career enabled him to purchase his dream home and enjoy a comfortable life for many years. Paul resided there with his wife and their 4 children, Paul Jr., Greg, Aletta, and Mark. Together, they built a happy life into their later years. In 2002, the family endured a tragedy when his beloved wife passed away. It was a significant loss for Paul, but he persevered. He planned to continue working at his clinic as long as he was able. His calm and balanced personality drew people to him. By 2003, Paul was still managing his private practice and maintained a close relationship with his youngest son, Greg. Greg visited frequently and took care of him often. They went fishing and ran marathons together. Greg had followed in his father's footsteps and become a doctor. He was employed at a hospital in Miami while also pursuing further medical education. Before moving to live with his father, Greg had married his assistant at the clinic and they had a child together. However, his marriage did not endure. A few years after their child's birth, he divorced his wife and returned to care for his father, who required support and attention. Although Greg's father was cheerful and desired an active life, he needed assistance in his old age, and Greg was willing to help him. On July 16, 2003, Greg did not appear for work. He was expected at the hospital by 7 a.m. to work until 3:30 p.m., but even by 7:30 a.m., he still had not arrived. This concerned his colleagues, as he was known for his punctuality and responsibility. They attempted to contact him by phone, but he did not answer. At that time, Greg was dating a nurse named Monica. His colleagues reached out to her to inquire about Greg's whereabouts, but she told them that she had not seen him since the previous evening when he had left to go home and care for his father. They tried to call Paul, Greg's father, but he did not answer his phone. Next, they contacted Paul's workplace, where his assistant informed them that Paul had not appeared there either. She did not know his whereabouts and mentioned that her calls to him also went unanswered. The situation grew increasingly worrying. Concerned, Monica decided to visit Paul's home to investigate further, fearing that, given his age, he might have had an accident and required assistance. When she arrived at the house, she immediately noticed that Paul's car was missing from the driveway. There were no other signs of alarm. She knocked on the door, but it was locked. Monica entered the house. It was messy and quiet. Feeling uneasy and fearful that there might be an intruder inside, she did not dare to go further. She called 911 to report Paul missing. The dispatcher found the situation suspicious, suspecting that a crime might have occurred. Monica agreed and decided to wait for the police to arrive. When the officers arrived, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside, they found Paul Jarrett lying lifeless on the floor, having been shot in the head. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting he had likely been shot while asleep and died instantly. During the initial inspection, officers noticed black spots around the gunshot wounds and on the bed linen, indicating traces of gunpowder gases that had burned his skin. It was evident that the attacker had been very close to Paul when he was shot. In the next room, Greg was found, and his death had been far from peaceful. The noise of the shooting likely woke him. He got up to investigate and encountered the attacker. There were likely 2 criminals involved. Greg had been shot 4 times. He attempted to defend himself, initially attacking the shooter, but was immediately wounded in the arms. Realizing he was outmatched, he tried to escape, prompting the criminal to fire wildly. The police found several bullet holes in the walls. Furniture in the rooms was overturned, and items from shelves were scattered on the floor. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. Typically, thieves target homes when the owners are absent, but sometimes they encounter them. If the criminals are armed, they might use their weapons to eliminate unwanted witnesses. However, in this case, the victims were deliberately targeted. Paul had clearly been killed in his sleep and never saw the criminals' faces, posing no threat to them. Greg was also asleep during the invasion, and if the intruders had not made noise with gunfire, he would not have been a problem for them. Robbers do not usually behave in this manner. They only open fire if the homeowner discovers them during the robbery and recognizes them. The police soon realized that the attackers had arrived with the intent to kill, and that the rearrangement of the furniture was merely an attempt to mislead the investigation. Furthermore, the locks showed no signs of damage, suggesting that the perpetrator knew the victims, either breaking into the house with knowledge or being let in involuntarily. The presence of numerous visible valuables and cash left untouched in the house suggested that it was not a typical robbery, as a real thief would have likely taken them. It was possible that the criminal was targeting specific valuables, but that remained speculation. Many neighbors later described the area as peaceful, safe, and a place where incidents were rare. The deceased maintained good relationships with neighbors and apparently had no enemies. Typically, Paul, like many residents, did not lock his doors, trusting those around him as friends rather than foes. Paul was well liked by his neighbors and was a respected physician. Police could not determine a specific motive for the crime. Strangely, Paul's car was missing, as was a gun from Greg's safe. Greg had a weapon for self-defense, but ballistics tests showed that the men had been shot with different guns. None of the neighbors reported hearing gunshots, which was highly unusual, suggesting the possible use of a silencer. Although several small houses were located near Paul's home, no one saw anything unusual. Forensic experts had not found any useful evidence inside the house. Paul's car was located about 20 kilometers from the crime scene. The car had been reported missing. The doctor's car was left in a parking lot near a dry cleaner, with the doors unlocked and keys still in the ignition, as if the criminal had expected it to be stolen. Fortunately, the police recovered the car. After a thorough examination, forensic scientists could not detect any DNA or fingerprints inside. The criminal had either worn gloves or wiped away any traces. Nothing appeared on the surveillance footage. The killer acted professionally and avoided being caught on camera. With no leads, the police were left with limited options. They had no choice but to start checking the immediate surroundings of the doctors in search of suspects. The first person they focused on was Monica, who had called 911. Although she had done the right thing by notifying the police and not entering the house herself, the authorities questioned whether she had known what she would find inside and deliberately avoided going further. After reviewing the evidence, they determined that Monica had no motive for Greg and Paul's deaths and had actually suffered a loss, as she and Greg were dating and planning to get married. Monica had a verified alibi and was eliminated as a suspect. Likewise, Greg's ex-wife also had an alibi and was not considered a suspect. The investigation then shifted focus to his father, Paul Jarrett, a renowned psychiatrist. Although he could have difficult clients and everyone experienced bad moods from time to time, people with problems could easily feel resentment. However, Dr. Paul's practice was impeccable. He was highly regarded by colleagues and patients, and no dissatisfied clients were identified. While police investigated various leads, searches continued at the victims' homes. A forensic scientist discovered a letter from a credit union addressed to Paul, sent shortly before his death. The letter warned him of some suspicious transactions on his bank account, which drew the attention of the police. They learned that access to Paul's account had been granted to his trusted assistant, Maria Katabi. This raised suspicions about her potential involvement in the tragedy. Police found that Maria had repeatedly attempted to cash counterfeit checks at banks, involving embezzlement of tens of thousands of dollars. However, despite her repeated attempts, the credit union had not approved the fraudulent transactions. Maria had no issues with her salary. She earned a substantial income, and Paul valued her work. However, it appeared that she had been stealing money from him, a fact discovered by a strange coincidence. Just a few days later, Paul was found dead in his home, which made it seem that Maria had a strong motive for the crime. Consequently, Maria became the prime suspect. She was summoned to the police station to discuss the use of her boss's money. Maria denied any involvement in the murder, asserting that there was no reason to kill Paul since they had long resolved all financial matters. A reliable employee reported that Paul had caught Maria writing several counterfeit checks. She was experiencing financial difficulties and had informed her boss about these issues. The assistant felt that resorting to illegal actions was her only option. Paul and Maria had worked together for many years, and he had grown very fond of her, trusting her completely. As a result, according to Maria, he forgave her financial fraud, and they continued to work together. Maria indeed had confirmed financial troubles, including tax problems and issues related to her property. She was going through a divorce. Given these problems, Paul felt sympathetic toward her and did not plan to terminate her employment. During the investigation, it was discovered that Maria had stolen $100,000 from Paul. He trusted her so thoroughly that he did not scrutinize her financial dealings. The last transaction she made was for $9,000. It was not possible to prove any involvement of Maria in what occurred. Maria had no other motive for any criminal acts and had a confirmed alibi for the incident, as did other potential suspects. Ultimately, the police reached a dead end and had to remove Maria from the suspect list. For many months, the case made no progress. Police repeatedly reviewed all the evidence but found no leads. Maria was the only person with an apparent motive, but her alibi excluded her as a suspect. Ultimately, the police had to wait for the attacker to make a mistake. They needed something concrete, such as a murder weapon. The only forensic evidence available consisted of a few shell casings. Police hoped the killer would use their weapon again, making it possible to catch them. However, if the criminal was clever, they likely disposed of the gun used in the double murder. In that case, the police needed to wait for the perpetrator to use a stolen gun. They constantly monitored news reports, focusing on gun-related crimes. The strategy was clear. All they could do was wait. The hardest time was for Aletta Jarrett, Paul's daughter. For months after her father and brother were shot, she returned to their home. In the Paul household, she was left alone. Paul and Greg were gone. Aletta, grieving and alone, came to the house where she had lost her loved ones. An older brother who had been killed, another family member who died after stopping NMI substances, and a third who died in a car accident. She did not intend to stay long in the house, as its gloomy atmosphere was overwhelming. Her goal was to create a memorial video and gather the belongings of her relatives because the house was scheduled for demolition. Aletta began recording, wanting to walk through the rooms one last time to remember the happy years when her loved ones were still alive. It reminded her of the day Paul died. She walked through the rooms, collecting items that were precious to her and had been left untouched for months. Among these was her father's jacket. While checking its pockets, she discovered a letter from her father's assistant, Maria Katabi. In the letter, Maria apologized profusely to her boss and elaborated on her family issues, struggles with redeeming the house, and tax debts. She confessed to embezzlement and promised to return the money once her problems were resolved. Aletta turned to the police for assistance. They had several questions about the letter. They wondered why Maria would write an apology letter if she claimed that Paul knew about her actions. It became clear that she had lied about her boss being aware of her financial fraud. During the first interrogation, Maria had not mentioned the letter, so the police asked her to come to the station again to explain. Maria, a trusted employee, admitted that she had forgotten about the note. She explained that she had initially been afraid to admit to the embezzlement, fearing that her boss would fire her. Therefore, she decided to write a confession letter first, and then speak to him in person. Maria left the note on her boss's desk at the end of the workday when he was absent, but planned to retrieve it the next morning, having changed her mind and wanting to discuss the matter face to face. Unfortunately, the note was no longer on the desk the following morning, indicating that Paul had already taken it. In any case, she spoke with her boss, and they reached an agreement on repaying the debt. Maria's story seemed unconvincing, particularly since the police had already caught her in a lie, which made them suspect her involvement in the case once more. However, there was no concrete evidence proving her guilt. 8 months after the murder, there was a real breakthrough in the investigation. A man was arrested for an unrelated crime. The most notable detail was that he used a similar firearm, a .22 caliber pistol. Upon examination, it was found that his shell casings matched those discovered in the Jarrett residence. Meanwhile, a confidential informant alerted the police to a planned armored car robbery. The criminals intended to recruit one of the security guards to assist in their scheme, which involved killing the other guards and stealing the transported cash. However, the approached security guard decided to outsmart them and informed the police, leading to the successful apprehension of the suspects. The individuals were identified as Jose Barca and Ruben Fernandez. Notably, one of them possessed the same pistol used in the shootings of Paul and Greg. Furthermore, a pistol stolen from the Jarrett residence was also found in their possession, eliminating any possibility of coincidence. This evidence confirmed their involvement in the double murder. The reason that no neighbors had heard gunshots during the attack became clear. The perpetrators had used silencers on their weapons. During interrogation, the police discovered that they had another accomplice, Juan Carlos Fernandez. He admitted to knowing Maria Katabi, with whom he had a romantic relationship that Maria had hidden from the authorities. Juan confessed that Maria had asked him to break into her boss Paul's house to retrieve a letter. Maria had previously stolen money from Paul and had written a confession of embezzlement, which she had left on Paul's desk. She later regretted this action, but was too afraid to ask the doctor to return the letter. Maria wanted to destroy the note, but had no opportunity, so she begged Juan to help her recover it. The consequences could have been severe, potentially costing her both her job and her freedom if her boss had contacted the police. Not wanting to go to jail, Maria asked her boyfriend to assist her in taking the letter. Juan agreed and enlisted his brother Ruben and his friend Jose to carry out the task. Maria provided them with information about the house. All she requested was the letter admitting her embezzlement. She did not order the killings. She also mentioned that Paul's house rarely locked its front door, so accessing the home posed no difficulty, allowing the criminals to break in easily. However, they did not know where to find the small note in such a large house. Fearing that searching might wake the homeowner, they decided to kill the occupants first and then search the house without being discovered. That is what they did. They shot Paul first, followed by his son Greg. Surprisingly, even after thoroughly searching the house, they could not locate the note they had been seeking. The robbers then fled, taking the gun with them. Despite a thorough police search, the note was never recovered. Paul's attentive daughter accidentally discovered this crucial piece of evidence. All 3 accomplices involved in Greg's shooting were arrested. They attempted to prove their innocence in the murders of the doctors. Jose Barca was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Juan Carlos' trial took much longer than those of the other defendants. He underwent mental evaluations and claimed that he had been unaware of the true nature of events. He had struggled with significant mental health issues for many years, casting doubt on his ability to perceive reality accurately. It was known that he had suffered a serious head injury, which had been exacerbated by a fall from a great height, worsening his mental problems. This was considered the main cause of the incident. Questions quickly arose as to whether the renowned psychiatrist, Paul Jarrett, had a grudge against him, which could have been the real motive for the crime. However, these speculations could not be confirmed. In the end, he still had to stand trial. In 2016, nearly 13 years after the crime, he confessed to the murders of Paul Jarrett and Greg. He apologized to the victims' families and asked them to pray for him in the name of Christ. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His brother, Ruben Fernandez, also admitted to being an accomplice in the robbery because he had been the driver. Ruben stated that he had not known about Juan and Jose's murderous intentions. They had originally come to the house to retrieve a letter. When the shooting began, Ruben feared that the homeowners were shooting at the robbers, so he fled the scene. As a result, he was sentenced to 7 years of probation. This light sentence was due to a lack of evidence linking him directly to the murders. Maria Katabi was arrested and had to stand trial. She had a troubled past, but her situation had improved when she got a job at Floordrop. She had been desperate to find the letter, as losing it could have endangered both her life and job security. Maria had no previous convictions, so her lawyer was optimistic about securing a suspended sentence. Maria Katabi went to trial. The prosecution insisted on a harsh sentence for the double murder, arguing that she had orchestrated the crime by directing the perpetrators to Paul's home. If Maria had not attempted to retrieve the letter she had written and given to Paul, it was possible that both victims would still be alive. The prosecutor's office needed evidence. In the meantime, Maria was in jail, talking to another inmate. During one conversation, Maria made a surprising confession to the inmate. She revealed that the doctor had no intention of firing her or contacting the police. He only wanted his money returned. However, Maria was broke and in danger of losing her home due to mounting debt. She had no intention of returning the stolen money. As a trusted employee, she knew the doctor well and was aware of the valuables in his home, which she saw as an opportunity to make more money. Maria staged the robbery and implicated her boyfriend to avoid incriminating herself and reduce her sentence. Her lawyer insisted that Maria could not be charged with double murder. She did not shoot the victims, did not plan the murders, and never even entered their house. The defense argued that Maria's primary objective had been the note, which could have been crucial evidence in serious legal matters, not murder. It was reasonable for her to attempt to retrieve such potentially damaging evidence. In her statement, Maria reiterated her testimony. She had given the doctor the note with the intention of retrieving it the following day and discussing the matter directly with her boss. However, when she returned, the note was no longer on the table. She admitted that she had involved her boyfriend and his friends in the robbery, not realizing that they were dangerous and potentially violent. During the trial, she tearfully recounted tragic episodes from her life. She testified that she had been raped at the age of 18 and had suffered abuse from her father. Later, she was regularly beaten by her husband. She had hoped to escape this vicious cycle of abuse with her boss's money, but that plan had failed. The jury found Maria Katabi not guilty of double murder, but guilty of armed robbery, sentencing her to 30 years in prison. During the trial, Aletta stated that she had let go of her anger and hostility toward the defendants. Instead, she chose to focus on the good memories of her loved ones and seek justice. Aletta now plans to honor Juan Carlos' request by praying for him. Moving on to the next case. Case of Natalia Melman. Natalia Melman was born in Argentina in 1986 to her parents, Gustav and Lava. In 1992, the family relocated to Miramar, a seaside city southwest of Buenos Aires, seeking better opportunities. After the move, the family faced financial hardship as a result of a failed business investment. Despite these obstacles, Natalia remained optimistic and found ways to help financially. She sold newspapers, lottery tickets, and various other items to support her parents and save money for a bicycle. Natalia was extremely close to her family and was known as an exceptional student. Her mother recalled that Natalia woke up every day at 4 in the morning to study. This commitment led to her earning top grades in almost all her subjects, and she was often chosen as a class monitor. Natalia dreamed of becoming an obstetrician-gynecologist and planned to study in Cuba, with the goal of returning to Argentina to help women with limited resources. This was her main ambition. In addition to her studies and family life, Natalia enjoyed having fun like any young girl. She loved spending time with friends and visiting different public places in Miramar, a tourist city with many attractions. In 2001, when Natalia was 15 years old, a tragic incident took place. On the night of February 3rd, she went out for a walk with friends. They first stopped at a bar and later went to the nightclub Amadeus. Natalia planned to speak with her ex-boyfriend at the club, but it appears the interaction did not go well, and she left the club at 1 a.m. This was the last time anyone saw her. Her parents believed she was staying at a friend's house and waited for her to return home. However, by the afternoon of February 4th, they became concerned when she still had not come back. Around 6 p.m., their worry increased, and they went to the friend's house where Natalia was thought to be. The friend stated that Natalia was not there. Natalia's parents grew increasingly anxious when they were unable to find any information about her whereabouts. They first contacted the hospital, hoping to find out whether she had been in an accident or if something else had happened. This effort produced no results. After receiving no information from friends or the hospital, they decided to report her disappearance to the police. Unfortunately, the police were not very cooperative. They asked questions about Natalia's clothing, her age, whether she had a boyfriend, and if she had a violent temperament. Rather than officially listing her as missing, they classified her as having run away from home. Her parents strongly objected, convinced that Natalia would not have left voluntarily, especially since she had been behaving normally before she disappeared. Witnesses saw Natalia at the club speaking with her ex-boyfriend, Maximiliano, who was accompanied by another girl named Diana. Upset, Natalia chose to leave the club. Another man present that night was Gustavo Fernandez, who was older than Natalia. Several witnesses reported that he followed Natalia as she said goodbye to her friends and left the party. Gustavo was known to the police because of his criminal history. He claimed that he had attended the party as a police informant. When he was taken to the police station to give a statement, he acknowledged that he had seen Natalia but insisted that he had not approached her. He stated that she was walking a few meters ahead of him and that although they were heading in the same direction, he lost sight of her when a patrol officer stopped him for questioning. After Gustavo provided his statement, he was released, which outraged Natalia's family. They believed he knew more than he admitted, but the police did not have sufficient evidence to detain him. The officers who questioned him observed several strange details, including scratch marks on one of his cheeks. Even so, the police chose to release Gustavo. Friends, relatives, and volunteers took part in the search for Natalia. Numerous photographs of her were printed, and volunteers traveled to nearby cities to distribute flyers. Unfortunately, these efforts did not result in any meaningful findings. Several police officers participated in the search, and a helicopter was used, but no leads were uncovered. As time went on, Natalia's parents started to lose hope. Many people claimed to have seen her in different places, with some saying she appeared to be under the influence of drugs, while others said they had seen her in other cities in Argentina with a young man, which led many to think that she had run away. At that point, people were actively searching for her, all hoping to find her alive and unharmed. The police supported these search efforts. On February 8, 2001, 4 days after she disappeared, Natalia was found. A forester discovered her body beneath a pile of branches. The body was soon identified as Natalia Melman. Natalia's parents learned about the discovery of her body through the media. At the time, Natalia's father was in another city in Buenos Aires, where he was searching for dogs to help locate Natalia's body. When he received the news, he immediately returned to Miramar. Natalia's father stayed with her from the moment her body was found until the autopsy. He wanted a complete investigation, but Natalia's fingernails had been cut, which was unfortunate because DNA from possible attackers is often found under fingernails when victims attempt to defend themselves. The forensic examination results revealed numerous signs of trauma, as well as traces of blood on her hands and thighs. She also sustained injuries that may have been caused by a blunt object. Additionally, her body showed burn marks, and her clothing was partially torn. Toxicology tests were performed, but no drugs were detected, although an extremely high level of alcohol was found in her blood. It is important to note that when Natalia left the party and said goodbye to her friends, she did not seem intoxicated. Those who were with her insisted that she had not been drinking, which raised many questions. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a rope placed around her neck. The attacker left a small knot, resembling a bow, on the left side of her neck. This indicates that the killer had ample time. The numerous injuries on her body indicate that she was subjected to multiple forms of violence, making this one of the most horrific crimes in the country's history. Biological evidence was discovered, including at least 5 different DNA samples that needed to be examined. Furthermore, it was established that she had been dead for 4 to 5 days, suggesting that Natalia most likely died on the day she disappeared or the following day. Police suspected Gustavo of involvement in the case. They began looking for him, but he seemed to be avoiding arrest. People who regularly saw him had not seen him in recent days, suggesting that he had become aware of the situation and fled. While the police continued their search, they obtained a warrant to search his home. There, they found a jacket that had been washed multiple times, which heightened their suspicions even more. A luminol test revealed several blood stains on the jacket, further reinforcing their belief in his guilt. They searched for him everywhere, but it seemed as though he had disappeared without leaving any trace. The media covered the case extensively, and Natalia's family received support from many people. Although there were numerous false leads, they also received a great deal of useful information. Just 1 week after the body was discovered, Gustavo was arrested. Initially, he refused to speak, but eventually, he provided evidence implicating 3 police officers. At the same time, the police were attempting to determine the location where the murder had taken place. Based on tips Natalia's family received after the case was publicized in the media, they identified the site as an abandoned house in the Copacabana area. The house belonged to a police officer, and there were allegations that some officers had used it to take young girls there, drug them, and sexually assault them. The police secured a search warrant for the house and brought in police dogs. The dogs reacted unusually to the strong odor inside the house. The police then concentrated on gathering evidence. They used luminol and uncovered traces of blood on the washed walls, along with hair and soil samples. These samples were compared with those found on Natalia's clothing, and they matched. This suggested that the soil in the house and the soil on Natalia's clothing were alike, leading investigators to believe that she most likely died in that house. Gustavo then accused 3 police officers, including Oscar Alberto Echenique, Ricardo Alfredo Suarez, and Ricardo Anselmini. This raised the total number of suspects to 4, but only 1 was arrested. The only individual held in pretrial detention was Gustavo. The remaining 3 police officers were free while awaiting trial, and all 4 pleaded not guilty. Police searched their homes and vehicles, uncovering crucial evidence in one of the cars. They found traces of blood DNA that matched Natalia's, along with hair that also belonged to her. DNA samples from the car were consistent with those of the 3 police officers. One of the DNA samples found on Natalia's body matched that of police officers Suarez, Anselmini, and Oscar Alberto. However, 2 additional DNA samples still needed to be identified, bringing the total to at least 5 different DNA samples discovered. Despite this substantial evidence, the only person arrested was Gustavo. 1 year later, in 2002, a verdict was delivered. Oscar Alberto Echenique, Ricardo Alfredo Suarez, and Ricardo Anselmini were sentenced to life imprisonment for murder, while Gustavo Daniel Fernandez received a lesser sentence of 25 years. It remains unclear whether Gustavo used physical violence. It is only known that he abducted Natalia. Gustavo's original sentence was 25 years in prison, but after several years, it was reduced to 15 years. In Natalia's case, a pubic hair found at the crime scene was sent for testing and was determined to belong to Ricardo Panadero, a former police chief in Miramar. An effort was made to bring Panadero to trial using additional evidence, which was ultimately achieved. However, during Panadero's trial, the judge ruled that the small DNA sample was insufficient to secure a conviction, and Ricardo Panadero was acquitted. Later, in 2019, Ricardo Panadero's earlier acquittal was overturned, and he is currently awaiting trial. It is important to note that Panadero's DNA evidence is not the only element in Natalia's case. Several witnesses reported seeing Panadero in the car that abducted Natalia on the night of the incident. However, the judge decided to disregard this testimony, stating that some of the witnesses were homeless and therefore viewed as less reliable. A new judge has since assumed the case, and stated that he will take into account all testimony and evidence. Despite receiving life sentences, the defendants were still granted certain privileges. They were allowed to leave prison for 2 hours every 15 days to preserve family connections and support reintegration into society. Following public demonstrations, this privilege was revoked. However, in 2017, they requested permission to leave again, and the court approved it. In October 2018, this privilege was revoked once more, but it was reinstated in December 2018. After that, the defendants were permitted to leave prison for 12 hours every 15 days without wearing a location tracking bracelet. Notably, one of the defendants lived only a 5-minute walk from Natalia's mother's home. This enabled them to move freely throughout the city, spend time with their family, and visit different places. Natalia's family has been attempting to have the defendants' permission to leave prison withdrawn. In 2021, the defendants applied for early release but were denied, despite their good behavior. It is important to note that Ricardo Panadero has been awaiting trial for 3 years, while Gustavo was released early after serving a short sentence. The case is marked by a strong sense of injustice, and a 5th DNA sample has still not been identified. Natalia's family continues to actively pursue these matters, but progress remains slow. Moving on to the next case. The case of Victoria Natsarova. Olga Tsbyk, a 35-year-old Ukrainian immigrant who worked as an eyelash artist, reported a robbery at her home. The incident took place on September 2, 2016. Olga Tsbyk contacted the police after realizing that several valuables had been taken from her bedroom. When officers arrived at the scene, Olga Tsbyk explained that she had earlier gone to the hospital because of intense dizziness and nausea. To look into the circumstances surrounding the incident, the police carried out a thorough interview with Olga Tsbyk. During this interview, she described a recent unpleasant interaction with a client named Victoria Narova, who had come to her home requesting urgent eyelash extensions. When Victoria arrived at Olga Tsbyk's home asking for immediate eyelash extensions, Olga Tsbyk told Victoria that she only performed eyelash extensions at a salon and did not see clients at her home. However, explaining this to Victoria proved pointless, and Olga Tsbyk eventually had to agree to let her in. During the investigation, it was discovered that Victoria had come to Olga Tsbyk's apartment carrying 3 slices of cheesecake from a well-known local bakery. Victoria ate 2 slices and insisted that Olga Tsbyk eat the 3rd slice. After drinking tea and eating the cheesecake, Olga Tsbyk began to feel ill. After Victoria left, Olga Tsbyk experienced severe nausea and eventually lost consciousness for about 30 minutes. After regaining consciousness, Olga Tsbyk called an ambulance and was transported to the hospital. However, medical tests did not reveal anything unusual in her blood. When Olga Tsbyk returned home, she noticed that several valuables were missing and reported the theft to the police. Officers observed that Olga Tsbyk appeared listless and unwell. The police suspected that Olga Tsbyk was under the influence of drugs and had fabricated the story. Despite these suspicions, Olga Tsbyk insisted that she had not taken any medication and believed that the cheesecake she had eaten caused her condition, possibly due to poisoning. While searching the scene, police found a box of cookies from a local store in the trash, which Olga Tsbyk identified as the packaging from the cheesecake Victoria had brought. Police collected the remaining baking residue from the cheesecake, which was sent for on-site analysis to determine whether it had caused Olga Tsbyk's health issues, but the forensic examination found nothing suspicious. Despite this, Olga Tsbyk continued to insist that the cheesecake was responsible for her condition. Olga Tsbyk stated that she had been to the hospital and that doctors had examined her body when she was admitted, and the police contacted the medical facility to inquire about her condition and test results. However, the doctors refused to provide information, citing patient confidentiality. The police viewed this as a reason to doubt Olga Tsbyk's account. The client Olga Tsbyk had mentioned could not be located, so the case was postponed. These details were later shared by a neighbor who, the very next day, noticed a suspicious woman at Olga's apartment. The woman came and went several times, lingering around the beauty specialist's apartment until she encountered the neighbor face to face. The strange woman claimed that her friend Olga was sick and then hurriedly left the building. The neighbor noticed that the door to Olga's apartment was open and looked inside to check on her. The apartment was unbearably stuffy. The heating was turned on full blast despite the 30-degree summer heat. Olga was alive, but she was unconscious. She was lying on her bed, wearing an unusual combination of clothing that included revealing underwear and warm athletic pants. When detectives learned about this, they suspected that someone had deliberately tried to change the victim's clothes. Pills containing a powerful drug were scattered around Olga. It appeared as though Olga had taken the pills with the intention of ending her own life. A neighbor immediately called 911, describing the strange woman as dark-haired, attractive, and very similar in appearance to Olga. After learning new details, investigators became convinced that the doppelganger woman was not a product of Olga's imagination. Following this realization, detectives began to pursue the case more actively. Everything they observed in the apartment appeared to resemble a crime scene that someone wanted to stage as a voluntary death. Detectives suspected that the persistent cheesecake client named Victoria Nerova was involved. Police began searching for Victoria, but they had no leads, no information about her identity, and no photograph. Later, however, the department was contacted by a private investigator, a former police officer who had been tracking the violent activities of con artists for a long time. He had already located Victoria online, where she advertised escort services on a dating website and through social media. The private investigator believed that she used online promotion to locate victims for her crimes, and that the scheme worked flawlessly. Victoria would arrive at the home of her next victim, then drug the person with psychoactive substances until they lost consciousness. After that, she would steal everything of value and then disappear. This activity could have continued unnoticed indefinitely if not for these tragic circumstances. Meanwhile, Olga Tsbyk eventually recovered from the disturbing events. After being discharged from the hospital, she shared the story of her poisoning on her social media page. After that, one of her clients unexpectedly said that she knew a man named Ruben Barakov who had experienced a similar incident. Ruben owned a dry cleaning business and had met Victoria Nazarova on a Russian dating site a couple of months before Olga's cheesecake poisoning. The new acquaintance invited Ruben to her home and bragged about being an excellent cook. He agreed and went to her place, but as soon as he tasted the food, he lost consciousness. The woman emptied his pockets, taking expensive watches, money, and cards. The man was under the influence of a very powerful psychoactive substance and sincerely believed that it had almost killed him. Later, when he started to regain consciousness, Victoria brought him to the dry cleaners, handed him over to his co-workers, told them that he was drunk, and then left. Only after that did Ruben realize that he had been robbed. The private investigator believed the situation was far more serious, and that the two poisoning victims were extremely fortunate to have survived. In 2017, he worked with a client from Russia to help track down the elusive criminal. Nadia Ford contacted the private detective after the disappearance of her mother, Alla Alexenko. Nadia herself lived in New York, USA, but had been born in Russia. Nadia was originally from Kotar. Her mother, Alla Alexenko, raised her daughter and son on her own and struggled greatly. She worked 5 jobs to support her children. Nadia had dreamed of living in the United States since childhood, and that dream came true when she moved to America to study in 2007. There, she met a man whom she married and took his surname, Ford. However, the marriage failed, and the couple divorced. Nadia remained in the United States and successfully built her life there. She kept a close relationship with her mother, who was left alone at that time. Years later, Alla Alexenko went missing in Russia, and in 2017 Nadia hired a private investigator to find her mother. In the effort to locate her, the private investigator discovered that Victoria had rented a car on the day Nadia's mother disappeared. He examined the vehicle's records and obtained surveillance footage dated October 5, 2014. The footage showed the car driving along a highway with 2 people inside. The driver, Victoria, and an emotionless woman in the front passenger seat who resembled the missing 54-year-old Alla Alexenko. Nadia believed that the woman in the footage was her mother. Nadia went to the police, who confirmed that Victoria had indeed rented the car. As a result, police summoned Victoria for questioning. During her interview, Victoria admitted that she had driven the rental car on October 5th, but claimed that she had been alone. Victoria agreed to undergo a lie detector test. She was released while awaiting the results, but it was later revealed that she failed the polygraph and became the main suspect in the case. Before police could arrest her, Victoria took advantage of the situation and quickly fled the country on the first available flight. Meanwhile, police broadened the search for the missing Alla Alexenko. Nadia actively took part in the investigation for 6 months, holding on to hope that her mother was still alive. During the investigation, police traced the route of the rental car, which led them to a forest near Victoria's hometown of Armavir. When officers reached the forest, they found a body located about 3 hours from Alla Alexenko's home. The body was severely burned and could not be visually identified. Nadia identified her mother's body by her teeth. Despite an extensive investigation, the cause of Alla Alexenko's death was never determined. Police issued an arrest warrant for Victoria Nazarova and forwarded it to Interpol. However, Victoria managed to evade capture for a long time. Nadia returned to the United States after attending her mother's funeral in Kodar. For a long period, Nadia struggled to cope with the pain of losing her loved one. Eventually, she regained her strength and promised her mother that she would seek justice and hold the person responsible for her mother's death accountable. One day, while browsing the internet, Nadia came across a post on social media. Victoria Nazarova, the primary suspect in her mother's death, was living an extravagant lifestyle in Mexico and appeared unconcerned about being wanted. Nadia informed U.S. authorities about Victoria's location, prompting an investigation. Nadia then hired a highly regarded American private investigator to accelerate the process. A wealthy friend covered the cost of the investigator's services because Nadia could not afford them herself. At that time, Nadia had been unemployed for several months while searching for her mother. The private investigator reviewed Victoria's social media images, including her most recent posts. Through this analysis, the investigator determined that Victoria was in the United States. In one selfie, the reflection in her sunglasses showed a car dashboard. After reviewing multiple vehicle models, the investigator identified the car as a Chrysler 300. Detectives were able to trace Victoria's recent photos to the Russian neighborhood of Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. By examining a database of similar vehicles in the area, police narrowed the search and identified the suspect. Despite various obstacles, authorities located Victoria and learned that she was living with her boyfriend in a residential complex where the Chrysler was registered in his name. Unaware that Interpol was searching for her internationally, Victoria continued to post photos online without concern. Detectives identified her boyfriend and contacted him. It was revealed that the boyfriend had been poisoned by Victoria and was seeking assistance. In addition, Victoria had poisoned her boyfriend's beagle, which resulted in the dog's death. On March 20, 2017, 41-year-old Victoria Nazarova was finally located and arrested. Nadia, the private investigator, and the police were able to feel a sense of relief. Allowing Victoria to remain free posed a serious danger, as she could have harmed many more people. During a search of Victoria's apartment, police found Olga Tsbyk's identity card. Victoria's primary motive for targeting Olga Tsbyk was not only her desire for money and valuables, but also her need for a passport. Victoria's temporary visa was close to expiring, and she needed a new form of identification to stay in the country and avoid prosecution in Russia. The face on Olga Tsbyk's passport closely resembled Victoria's. Police believed that Victoria planned to kill Olga Tsbyk and assume her identity. Fortunately, Olga Tsbyk's neighbor intervened and saved her life. When the poisoned cheesecake was later examined in a laboratory, investigators discovered a banned sedative that Victoria had added to the dessert. The investigation showed that Victoria used this sedative to carry out her plan. She increased the dosage to render the victim unconscious. Olga Tsbyk was fortunate to survive the incident. The extremely high temperature in her apartment was not accidental. Victoria deliberately raised the temperature to intensify the effects of the sedative, which could have been fatal. It was clear that Victoria had planned the situation in advance. To avoid suspicion, she attempted to conceal her actions by increasing the heat in the apartment and dressing Olga Tsbyk in warm clothing. After her arrest, Victoria denied all accusations, including involvement in the disappearance and murder of Nadia's mother, as well as the attempted murder of Olga Tsbyk and other victims. Police stated that Victoria was also a suspect in the theft of 2 fur coats in May 2016, although that case was never resolved. Following several additional incidents, it became clear that Victoria had been involved in multiple thefts, meeting men online, visiting their homes, drugging them, and stealing their belongings. Most of the men did not report the crimes to police due to fear of publicity, allowing Victoria to avoid conviction. The trial was delayed for approximately 6 years because of the pandemic and the lengthy preparation of the case materials. The case finally went to trial in January 2023, drawing significant media and public attention. Throughout the proceedings, Victoria chose to remain silent. The court was prohibited from examining details of Alla Alexenko's death because the crime occurred in another country. Victoria's defense attorney argued that there was no direct evidence or testimony linking her to the crime, specifically the poisoning of the cheesecake and forcing Olga Tsbyk to consume it. According to Olga Tsbyk's testimony, Victoria brought 3 slices of cheesecake to Olga Tsbyk's apartment, ate 2 of them in front of Olga Tsbyk, and then Olga Tsbyk ate the 3rd slice without any hesitation. The prosecution argued that this was not accidental and that Victoria had intentionally added the drug to only 1 slice of the cake, knowing exactly which slice it was, and deceived Olga Tsbyk by consuming the other 2 pieces herself. After a comprehensive review of the case, the jury found Victoria Nazarova guilty of second-degree intentional homicide. Although the maximum sentence for this offense was 25 years in prison, the judge reduced the sentence to 21 years. However, under the law, Victoria would be eligible for parole after serving 15 years in prison. Victoria Nazarova had once been a refined and fashionable woman, but her life changed entirely after she was sentenced to prison. The harsh conditions of prison life affected Victoria significantly, including inadequate and poor nutrition. A fight in prison left Victoria seriously injured, nearly costing her her eyesight. Victoria sued the prison, filing a lawsuit alleging negligence by the guards who failed to intervene during the violent incident. The case was eventually resolved outside of court, with Victoria receiving $325,000 in compensation. In an interview from prison, Victoria continued to assert her innocence, denying the charges connected to the crime she committed. Victoria will serve the remainder of her sentence in a U.S. prison before being deported to Russia, where she will face trial for her alleged involvement in the murder of Alla Alexenko. Alla Alexenko's daughter, Nadia, has expressed relief that Victoria is being held accountable for her actions and will no longer be able to evade justice. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.